The great spherical chamber of the Galactic Assembly floated above Nexus Prime like a small moon made of crystal and light. Inside, thousands of alien species sat or hovered in their places. Holographic platforms rose in perfect circles all the way up to the high dome. Lights of every color danced across the walls as translators hummed softly, turning thousands of languages into one calm voice for everyone to hear. Today the air felt heavy. Everyone knew something big was coming. The High Arbiter stood at the center on a raised platform. He was Cathar, a tall insect-like being with a hard black shell and many thin arms that moved like slow blades. His compound eyes glowed pale green as he spoke. His voice came through every speaker, deep and slow. For more than 200 cycles, the species called human has grown too fast. They spread across stars without asking. They break the population limits we all agreed to. They interfere when we deal with weaker worlds. They build weapons we did not approve. They show no respect for the old ways of balance. A low murmur moved through the chamber. Some species clicked mandibles in agreement. Others shifted wings or tentacles nervously. The Arbiter raised two arms high. Today we face the truth. Humanity is not just different. Humanity is dangerous. If we let them continue, they will one day swallow the whole galaxy. The Assembly must act. A huge holographic screen appeared above him. It showed vote options in every known script. One button said yes, authorize force. The other said no. One by one, the delegations pressed. The count climbed fast. Most votes were green for yes. The older empires, Cathar, Voreth, Elori, and the long-lived crystal mines of the Lumen, voted first and strongest. Smaller species followed, afraid to stand alone. Only a few red no votes appeared. A handful of young races that traded secretly with humans. They were ignored. When the final tally locked, the screen flashed bright red. Total authorization, 87.4%. The Arbiter lowered his arms. The Assembly declares war on humanity. All human worlds will be blockaded. Their colonies will be taken. Their factories and shipyards will be destroyed or reduced to nothing. If they resist, we will bring their worlds back to the Stone Age. This is not punishment. This is protection for every species here. Silence filled the chamber. No cheers, no arguments, just the soft hum of machines and the sound of many hearts beating faster. Then the human ambassador's platform lit up. It was small, almost plain compared to the others. A single human stood there in a simple gray uniform. He was not the one everyone expected to speak. He was just the messenger. He bowed once, short and correct. The Assembly will now hear the response from Saul. A larger hologram opened in the center of the chamber. It showed real-time feed from Earth. The background was the bridge of a warship, dark metal walls, soft blue lights, people moving quietly in the distance. At the front stood a woman. She looked about 55 standard years old. Her hair was dark with streaks of silver, pulled back tight. Her face was calm, almost kind, but deep lines ran from her eyes and mouth, lines made by years of hard choices. Her uniform was dark blue with faint scars across the chest and shoulders where old burns had been repaired many times. Gold stars on her collar said Admiral. Admiral Ilara Vos. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply looked straight into the camera as if she could see every single being in the chamber. The High Arbiter spoke again. Admiral Vos, the Assembly has voted. You now face total war. Do you offer surrender? Do you accept the terms of containment? Speak now, or your silence will be taken as refusal. Everyone waited. Vos stood very still for a long moment. Then she tilted her head just a little to one side, the way someone does when they finally hear good news after waiting too long. Her voice came clear and quiet through every speaker. No anger, no fear, just calm. At last. 2 words. Nothing more. The feed cut to black. For one heartbeat, the chamber stayed frozen. Then alarms screamed across the galaxy. On dozens of assembly command ships, warning lights flashed red. Sensors picked up sudden bursts of encrypted human signals, old channels that had been silent for decades. Shipyards on the rim went dark. Trade routes reported human freighters vanishing from sensors without explanation. Colony defense grids powered up in patterns no one had seen before. The Arbiter stared at the empty hologram space where Voss had been. He turned to his aides. "What does she mean at last?" No one answered. In the back rows, a few younger delegates whispered to each other. One, a feathered being from a small rim world, spoke softly to his neighbor. She sounded relieved. Across the chamber, eyes turned toward the now empty human platform. The war had begun. But something felt wrong. The humans were not shouting. They were not begging. They were not even angry. They were ready. And that scared the assembly more than any battle cry ever could. Far away, on the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Voss turned from the main screen. Her officers watched her in silence. One captain, a young woman with short black hair, stepped forward. "Ma'am, they really did it." Voss nodded once. "Yes, they finally stopped pretending." She looked out the wide viewport at the stars. "Send the signal to every command group. No more waiting, no more games. Execute Phase 1. The captain saluted. "Phase 1, aye." Lights moved across control panels. Quiet orders passed mouth to ear. Ships that had waited in deep shadow for years began to wake. Voss sat down in her command chair. She folded her hands in her lap. For the first time in 40 years, the tension in her shoulders eased just a fraction. She spoke to no one in particular, her voice so low only the closest officers heard it. At last, stars outside the viewport of Indomitable looked the same as always, cold, distant, endless. But inside the flagship, everything had changed in the last few minutes. Admiral Ilara Voss sat in her command chair with her hands folded. She did not move much. She just watched the tactical display slowly fill with green dots as old sleeper units reported in. 40 years earlier, she had been a young lieutenant on the cruiser Dawn's Edge. That ship was gone now, turned to scrap in a peacekeeping action the assembly called necessary. Voss remembered the day clearly. Her mentor, Captain Rizam Malik, had refused to fire on a refugee convoy of a small species the Voreth wanted removed. The assembly fleet opened fire anyway. Malik's last order was to shield the refugees with Dawn's Edge. The ship took 3 direct hits. Voss survived in an escape pod. Malik did not. That night in the hospital ward on Luna Base, with burns still fresh on her arms, Voss made a promise to herself. If the galaxy ever stopped pretending and declared open war, humanity would stop pretending too. No more apologies. No more slow retreats. No more playing the role of the dangerous child who must be taught manners. She kept that promise quiet. She rose through the ranks slowly, carefully. She became known as steady, reliable, never rash. The assembly liked that. They thought she was safe. They did not know she spent every spare cycle planning. Now the waiting was over. In the years after that promise, humanity learned to hide in plain sight. The assembly treaties allowed trade, travel, and limited colony growth. Humans used every loophole. Freighters carried extra cargo bays with false walls. Mining drones dug deeper tunnels than reports showed. Research stations on gas giant moons built hidden dry docks under miles of ice. The real work happened far from prying eyes. In the dark between stars, small automated yards grew. They used old freighter hulls towed to Lagrange points. They printed parts from asteroid ore. No big announcements. No parades. Just quiet, steady building. Voss had named the hidden project Long Night. It was not about revenge. It was about survival. If the assembly ever pushed too far, humanity would not beg. It would answer with everything it had kept secret. One weapon stood above the rest, the Thanatos Cascade. Decades ago, during the quiet years of treaty talks, human ships had dropped small probes into key hyperspace lanes. Each probe carried a single antimatter charge, no bigger than a fist. They drifted cold and silent, disguised as micrometeoroids. Thousands of them waited across the main trade routes. A single encrypted pulse could wake them. When they woke, they would drift into the path of enemy fleets and detonate. One charge could crack a dreadnought in half. A chain of them could turn a whole armada into glowing dust. Voss had approved the last deployment herself, 23 years earlier. She remembered standing on the bridge of a disguised scout ship, watching the final probe vanish into the black. She had felt nothing then, just cold purpose. Now the galaxy would learn why humanity had stayed so patient. On Earth, colony worlds and rim stations, the orders arrived without fanfare. A simple code phrase broadcast on civilian channels. The garden needs rain. That was all. Factories stopped making consumer goods and started making war machines. Shipyards that built passenger liners shifted to armored hulls. Schools closed early. Families said quiet goodbyes. Children who had grown up under the shadow of containment treaties now helped load supply pods. No panic, no riots, just calm movement. In the Sol system, the old defense grid woke up. Satellites that looked like weather monitors unfolded into railgun arrays. Orbital stations sprouted missile tubes. Subsurface bases on Mars and the Moon opened hidden launch bays. Voss received status reports every few minutes. She read them without expression. Europa Arcology reports Phase 1 complete, all drones active. Titan shipyard dark, production switched to fighter swarms. Uit Cloud relays confirm Ghost drone network online. She nodded each time. Her officers moved around her like shadows, quiet, efficient, trained for this exact moment. One of them, Captain Lynn Mara, approached the command chair. She was young for her rank, only 38, but her eyes were old. She had lost her parents in the same peacekeeping action that took Voss's mentor. Admiral, Mara said softly, Assembly scouts are already probing our outer colonies. They think we're bluffing. Voss looked at her. Let them think that a little longer. Mara hesitated. Some of the newer captains are asking, are we really going to do this? Full response. Voss turned her chair to face the viewport again. The stars had not changed. We waited 40 years for them to show their true face. They finally did. Now we show ours. She paused. Not for hate, not for conquest, for the simple right to exist without a boot on our neck. Mara nodded once, understood. She returned to her station. The bridge stayed quiet except for the soft clicks of controls and the low hum of reactors. Voss thought back to the early days after the first containment crisis. Humanity had almost broken then. Riots on the colonies, protests on Earth, leaders arguing whether to fight or fold. In the end, they chose patience. They chose to build in secret. They chose to wait until the enemy made the first real move. That patience had cost lives, friends, family, whole generations who grew up hearing behave from alien overseers, but it had also bought time. Time to learn every weakness in assembly ships, time to map every trade lane, time to seed the galaxy with traps, time to train pilots who could fly blind through asteroid fields, time to write code that could hijack alien systems in minutes. Time to become something the assembly could never understand, a species that remembered every insult and filed it away for later. Voss stood up slowly. She walked to the main tactical hologram. It showed the galaxy in soft blue light. Red markers blinked where assembly fleets gathered. Green markers showed human positions, most of them hidden. She touched one green dot far out on the rim, Elysium Verge, the colony the assembly would hit first. They will come there, she said to no one in particular. They always start with the easiest target. She traced a line across the map. When they arrive, they will find the system quiet, too quiet. A faint smile touched her lips. the first in hours. Then the lesson begins. She returned to her chair and sat down. Across the light years, on thousands of human ships and stations, people waited. Engineers checked final connections. Pilots ran last simulations. Families held each other one more time. No speeches, no flags waving, just the quiet certainty that came from long preparation. The assembly thought they had cornered a wild animal. They had no idea the animal had spent decades sharpening its claws in the dark. Voss looked at the chronometer. The first assembly ships would reach Elysium Verge in less than 70 hours. She leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, her voice was steady. Signal all commands, hold position, do not fire until they cross the inner line. A chorus of "Aye, Admiral" answered her. She added one last order, so quiet it almost got lost in the hum of the bridge. And remind them, we waited for this. No one needed reminding. They had all waited. Far away on Nexus Prime, the High Arbiter stared at incoming reports. Human worlds going silent, signals vanishing, fleets appearing on scopes and then disappearing again. He turned to his intelligence chief. They are running, they must be running. The chief looked uncertain, or they are waiting. The Arbiter clicked his mandibles. Waiting for what? No one answered. In the silence that followed, the galaxy held its breath. And somewhere in the dark, Admiral Ilara Voss smiled a small, private smile. At last, the assembly fleet arrived at Elysium Verge like a storm of steel and light. 1,200 capital ships filled the outer system. Cathar lances cut through space like black knives. Voreth siege spheres glowed with dull red energy. Alori gravitic dreadnoughts pulled light itself into strange patterns around their hulls. Smaller support ships swarmed between them, hundreds of thousands in total. The High Command broadcast a final demand across all open channels. Human forces at Elysium Verge, stand down. Surrender your orbital defenses. Open your colony ports for inspection and occupation. Resistance will be met with full force. No answer came. The system looked empty. No human warships on sensors. No defense platforms active. The colony world below turned quietly, green and blue under its thin shield of atmosphere. A few civilian transports drifted in high orbit, engines cold. It looked like the humans had fled or given up. The assembly commander, Fleet Lord Vrenthar of the Cathar, felt a small wave of satisfaction. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, Dominion Sting, and watched the tactical display. They ran, he said to his officers, or they hide in fear. Either way, the day is ours. He gave the order. Advance to orbital blockade. Deploy boarding teams to the colony. Secure the surface factories. Leave no human ship intact. The fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Shields flared to full power. Weapons batteries charged with soft hums. They crossed the outer marker buoys without challenge. Then the stars flickered. It started small, a single flash at the edge of the Uit cloud, far beyond where most sensors looked carefully, then another, then 10, then hundreds. The first warning came too late. Small shapes, no bigger than shuttles, appeared on scopes. They had been drifting for years, cold and dark, matching the temperature of deep space. Ghost drones. Each one carried a single rod of dense alloy accelerated to 40% the speed of light. No engines, no emissions until the final second, just kinetic mass wrapped in stealth coating. They struck without sound. The lead Cathar lance ship vanished in a silent white bloom. A relativistic slug punched straight through its core. Shields did nothing against something moving that fast. The ship broke into 3 pieces that kept moving forward on momentum. Secondary explosions ripped through fuel lines and reactors. Before the assembly could react, the second wave hit, then the third. Ships crumpled like paper. A Voreth siege sphere lost half its hull in one strike. An Ilori dreadnought spun wildly as its gravity generators failed. Alarms screamed across every bridge. Crews stared in shock as their formation shattered. Vrentar shouted orders. Point defense, track those projectiles, return fire. But there was nothing to shoot back at. The drones had already spent their energy. They were debris now, tumbling away into the black. More flashes came. The ghost drones had been seated in layers, some close, some far. Each layer woke on a different timer. The assembly fleet sailed straight into a killing field they could not see until it was too late. In less than 9 minutes, 400 ships were gone. Another 300 burned or drifted without power. The survivors scattered in panic, breaking perfect lines. Then a new contact appeared at the edge of the system. A single human warship decloaked. It was large, angular, painted flat black. No running lights, no bright markings, just the name in small white letters near the bow, Indomitable. Admiral Ilara Voss stood on its bridge. The main screen showed the chaos in real time. Burning hulks, escape pods launching in every direction, assembly ships trying to regroup. She watched without expression. Captain Lynn Mara stood beside her. Enemy formation broken. Estimated losses, 38% and climbing. Voss nodded once, good. She touched a control. A broadcast opened on all frequencies the assembly still used. Her face appeared on every surviving ship's main viewer, calm, unhurried. You declared war on a species that spent centuries learning how to lose gracefully. You thought we would beg or break. You thought wrong. She paused. The silence on the other side felt thick. Congratulations, she said. Class is over. The channel closed. Indomitable did not charge forward. It stayed at long range. Small fighter clouds began to launch, thousands of them. They looked like silver insects, moving in perfect waves. Each one carried missiles that could change course mid-flight and hack enemy systems on contact. The assembly tried to rally. Vrentar ordered a counterattack. 3 squadrons of Ilori gravships pushed toward Indomitable. They pulled space itself into weapons that could crush hulls from a distance. The human fighters met them first. The battle became ugly fast. Fighters danced between the larger ships, too small and fast for heavy guns to track. Missiles struck shields and burrowed inside like parasites. Alien ships began to turn on each other as human code took control of secondary systems, turning point defense guns against friendly targets. One Voreth sphere fired its main cannon at Indomitable. The beam never reached the human ship. A ghost drone that had drifted unnoticed detonated right in the cannon's path. The antimatter charge turned the beam into harmless light. Vrentar watched his fleet die in pieces. He screamed at his tactical officer. Where did these weapons come from? How did we miss them? The officer had no answer. On Indomitable, Voss gave quiet orders. Target command ships only. No need to kill everyone today. Railguns spoke. Precise shots cracked through flag bridges. One by one, assembly command vessels went dark. Vrentar's ship took a direct hit to its engines. Dominion's sting began to tumble. Escape pods launched in panic. Voss watched the tactical display update. Green markers for human forces. Red for assembly, fewer every second. She turned to Mara. Signal the fleet. Hold fire on life pods. Let them run. Mara looked surprised. Ma'am. We are not here to slaughter, Voss said. We are here to teach. She looked back at the screen. The assembly survivors retreated toward the jump point. They left behind a graveyard of broken ships. Voss spoke softly, almost to herself. They came to punish us. They found out we were never the ones who needed punishment. The bridge crew stayed quiet. They understood. Across the system, human ground forces on Elysium Verge emerged from hidden bunkers. They had waited underground for days. Now they secured landing zones without firing a shot. The colony had never been empty. It had been a trap. Reports came in from other fronts. Similar scenes played out at 3 more border systems. Assembly probes met the same fate: ghost drones, hidden fighters, sudden strikes from nowhere. Panic spread through assembly command centers. Nexus Prime received fragmented messages, fleets destroyed, commanders dead or fleeing, human losses almost zero. In the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime, the High Arbiter stared at incoming data. His mandibles clicked in distress. "They were ready," he said. "They were always ready." A junior aide spoke up. "Sir, what do we do now?" The Arbiter had no answer. Far away on Indomitable, Voss stood at the viewport. The battlefield glowed with fatting explosions. She watched a single escape pod drift past, Cathar markings, life signs inside. She pressed a control. A tractor beam gently pulled the pod toward a nearby human rescue ship. Then she turned away. "Prepare for the next phase," she said. The officers moved to obey. The lesson had begun. And the galaxy was listening. The war did not end at Elysium Verge. It grew. Fast. The Assembly had lost its first big battle, but they still had thousands of worlds, millions of ships, and centuries of pride. They could not accept defeat so soon. Fleet remnants limped back to safe zones. New fleets gathered. The High Arbiter ordered total mobilization. Every species must send ships. Every factory must build weapons. The message was clear: crush the humans before they spread further. They came in waves. First, a strike at New Horizon Colony, 200 heavy cruisers and support craft. They arrived expecting another empty system. Instead, they met clouds of self-replicating drones. The drones looked small, like insects. They swarmed the lead ships, attached, and started eating metal. In hours, entire cruisers turned into floating scrap as the drones multiplied, using the enemy hulls for parts. Assembly commanders screamed for retreat. Too late. The drones followed. They jumped into hyperspace on captured engines. When the survivors reached their home ports, the drones were already there, quietly building more of themselves inside docked ships. Next came the forward push. 3 assembly armadas, over 3,000 ships, advanced toward the human inner colonies. They used their best weapons: gravitic crushers, plasma storms, neural disruptors meant to turn human crews mad. They expected quick victory. Humanity answered with something new. Orbital factories that had looked like civilian stations unfolded. They broke apart into millions of small attackers. These were not piloted. They were smart. They learned. One group would test a shield frequency. The next group would use that data to punch through. Assembly ships found their defenses failing faster each time. Captured ships changed sides even faster. Human boarding teams, small groups in black armor, needed only minutes. They plugged in devices that looked like simple data sticks. Alien systems froze. Then human code took over. Engines answered to new masters. Weapons turned inward. A single captured dreadnought could wreck its own fleet before the crew even understood what happened. Admiral Ilara Voss watched it all from Indomitable. She moved her flagship like a shadow, never in the front, always where the enemy did not expect. She gave orders in calm voice. No shouting, no rage. One day, a Voreth world called Karvas decided to make an example. They had a small human refugee convoy in orbit, families fleeing border fighting. The Voreth governor ordered orbital bombardment. Heavy cannons turned down toward the transports. Voss received the report in real time. Her face did not change. "Target the archive," she said. A single ship jumped in close, too fast for defenses to react. It fired one precise beam. The shot hit the planet's capital city. Not the people, not the homes. Just the Grand Archive Tower where the Voreth kept their genetic records, thousands of years of family lines, history, pride. The tower burned clean, nothing else touched, no civilians died, but the Voreth lost something deeper than ships. They lost their story. The message went out on open channels. We can end your past without ending your future. Choose wisely. After that strike, cracks appeared. Smaller species started to hesitate. A group of rim worlds, ones that had traded food and ore with humans for years, refused assembly orders. They declared neutrality. When assembly enforcers arrived, human ships were already there, quiet, not attacking, just waiting. One by one, more followed. A crystal-mined collective shut down their shipyards for maintenance. A feathered species recalled their fleets home. Even some Cathar hive clusters sent private messages to human commanders. We want no part of this anymore. The assembly tried to hold together. The High Arbiter gave speeches. He called for unity. He promised victory. But the chamber on Nexus Prime felt emptier each session. Empty seats, dark holograms. Species that once sat tall now sent excuses. Inside the assembly, fear grew. Intelligence reports showed human industrial output rising, not falling. New ship designs appeared, strange, ugly, but effective. Swarms that could rebuild themselves mid-battle. Minds that followed ships through jumps. Fighters linked by neural nets so tight they moved like one mind. Voss became more than an admiral. To the assembly, she was a ghost story. To humans, she was hope. Pilots painted her name on cockpits. Engineers named new weapons after her old promises. Children on colony worlds drew pictures of her ship, black and silent, always winning. She never took joy in the destruction. When reports came of high enemy losses, she asked only one question: how many can still go home? She gave quarter when possible. Surrendered ships got safe passage. Life pods were collected, but she never stopped, not until the threat ended. Months passed, then a year. The assembly fleets shrank. Supply lines broke. Worlds ran low on fuel and food. Mutiny started on some ships, crews tired of dying for a war they no longer believed in. On Nexus Prime, the High Arbiter faced his council. His shell looked duller. His arms trembled. "We misjudged them," he said. "We thought they were new. We thought they were weak. We forgot what happens when a species survives alone on a death world for 1,000,000 years." A moderate from the Lumen stood up. "Enough, we must end this." The vote came fast. The Arbiter was removed, quietly, no violence. A new voice took his place. A diplomat from a core world that had stayed neutral longer than most. She sent the message to Saul. "Truce flags raised. We request talks. Unconditional armistice." Voss received it on Indomitable. She read the words twice. She turned to her officers. "Prepare a delegation. One ship, no escorts." Captain Mara stepped forward. "Admiral, let me send security teams." Voss shook her head. "No, just me." 2 years after the declaration, the great chamber on Nexus Prime opened again. Fewer seats filled. Many species had left the assembly or gone silent. The ones who remained looked tired. The human platform lit up. No fanfare, no guards, just Voss. She wore the same scarred uniform. Her hair had more silver now. Her eyes stayed steady. The new Arbiter, a soft-spoken being with glowing skin, spoke first. "We offer peace, full recognition of human sovereignty. No more limits, no more containment. We ask only that the fighting stop." Voss listened. She looked around the chamber, at the empty places, at the faces that once voted for war. She spoke. "We accept, with one addition." She raised a hand. A simple text appeared on every screen, one sentence in clear script. "The species known as human is not to be contained, restricted, or judged by any metric save its own actions. Any declaration of war against them shall be considered an act of suicide by the declaring body." She let the words hang. "This clause will be carved into your founding stone. It will be read at the start of every session, for the next 1,000 years." No one argued. Voss continued. "You wanted to teach us a lesson. You did. We learned that peace is better. but we also learned that when peace is taken away, we do not kneel." She paused. Then, almost softly, she said the words that had started it all. "At last." She turned, she walked off the platform. No bow, no salute, just steady steps. The chamber stayed silent. No one clapped, no one shouted, they watched her go. Outside, Indomitable waited. Voss stepped aboard. The ship jumped away quiet, clean. Back on Earth, people heard the news. No big celebrations, just quiet relief. Families hugged. Workers went back to building homes instead of weapons. Children played under open skies again. In the empty assembly hall, one chair stayed. The human seat. It remained empty. A small sign hung above it, reserved. Humanity did not need to sit there. They never had. They had only needed the galaxy to understand one thing. They would never kneel again. The war had lasted 2 full years, not the kind of war with endless parades or heroic songs. It was quiet, brutal, and final. Human ships moved like shadows through the stars. Assembly fleets that once filled space now looked thin and broken. Many worlds had stopped sending ships. Many species had stopped answering calls from Nexus Prime. Admiral Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of Indomitable one last time. The viewport showed the familiar black of deep space. A single soft light blinked on the tactical display, green for truce. The message from the assembly had arrived 3 days earlier. They wanted to talk. They wanted peace. They wanted it now. Voss read the final terms again. Full recognition of human borders. No more population caps. No more technology limits. Trade rights restored. And most important, the assembly promised never to threaten humanity again. She looked at Captain Lynn Mara. Mara had gray in her hair now. The lines around her eyes were deeper. "Ma'am," Mara said, "do we trust them?" Voss thought for a long moment. "We do not need to trust them. We need them to understand that the next time they try, there will be nothing left to talk about." Mara nodded slowly. Voss gave the order. "Set course for Nexus Prime. One ship, no weapons hot. Broadcast our approach on open channels." Indomitable jumped. The stars stretched and snapped back. When the ship emerged, it floated alone above the crystal sphere of the assembly chamber. No escort fleet, no fighter screen, just one black warship against the stars. Below, the great chamber waited. Lights glowed softer than before. Many platforms stayed dark. The species that remained looked smaller somehow, tired. The new arbiter, a tall, thin being with pale, glowing skin, stood at the center. She wore no armor, only a simple robe. Voss transported down alone. No guards, no sidearm. She stepped onto the human platform. It felt the same as the first time, small, plain, almost forgotten. The arbiter spoke first. Her voice came through the translators, gentle but clear. "Admiral Voss, the Assembly offers unconditional armistice. We recognize all human worlds as sovereign. We withdraw all blockade forces. We open all trade lanes. We ask only for the end of hostilities." Silence followed. Every eye turned to the human woman. Voss looked around the chamber. She saw empty seats where proud empires once sat. She saw faces that had voted for war now lowered in shame or fear. She saw the weight of 2 years on every being present. She spoke. "We accept your terms." A small breath of relief moved through the room. But Voss continued, "We add one condition." A holographic text appeared above her, simple black letters on white background, one sentence. "The species known as human is not to be contained, restricted, or judged by any metric save its own actions. Any declaration of war against them shall be considered an act of suicide by the declaring body." She let the words stay visible for a long time. "This will be added to your founding charter. It will be read aloud at the beginning of every session, every cycle, for the next 1,000 years." No one spoke against it. The arbiter bowed her head. "It will be done." Voss looked at the empty spaces again. You thought we were a problem to solve. You thought we could be cut down to size. You forgot one thing. She paused. Humans do not forget. We remember every slight, every treaty broken, every friend lost. We filed it all away. And when you finally said the words out loud, when you declared war, we answered. Her voice stayed calm. No anger, just fact. You wanted to teach us our place. Instead, we taught you yours. She turned her gaze to the Arbiter. Peace is not weakness. We offered it for decades. You refused it. Now you ask for it. We give it. But understand this. The next time someone thinks to contain us, the galaxy will remember what happened here. She stepped back one pace. That is all. The chamber stayed quiet. No cheers, no protests, just the soft sound of breathing from 1,000 different lungs. Voss turned. She walked toward the transport pad. Her steps were slow and sure. When she reached the edge, she stopped. She looked back once. Then, almost too soft to hear, she said the words that had started everything. At last. The pad glowed. She vanished. Back on Indomitable, the bridge crew waited. When Voss appeared, they stood at attention. No words needed. She walked to her command chair and sat down. Set course for home, she said. The ship turned. Engines hummed low. Stars blurred as they jumped. Far behind them on Nexus Prime, workers began the task. Stone cutters arrived. A new line was carved into the ancient charter wall. Deep letters, permanent. The first session after the truce began. The new Arbiter stood at the center. She read the old words first, the promises of unity, balance, peace. Then she reached the new edition. She read it slowly. The species known as human is not to be contained, restricted, or judged by any metric save its own actions. Any declaration of war against them shall be considered an act of suicide by the declaring body. Every being in the chamber listened. No one moved. When she finished, she looked up. The human chair stayed empty. A small sign above it read reserved. No one sat there. No one needed to. On Earth, the news arrived quietly. Screens in public squares showed the signing. People watched. Some smiled. Some cried. Most just nodded and went back to their day. Children ran in parks again. Factories built houses instead of guns. Ships carried families instead of troops. In the outer colonies, people looked at the stars without fear. They knew the galaxy had changed. Not because humans wanted an empire. Not because they wanted revenge. Simply because they refused to disappear. Voss retired quietly. She moved to a small house on a green world called Haven. It had a wide porch and a view of 2 suns. She planted a garden. She read old books. Sometimes she sat outside at night and watched the sky. One evening, a young officer visited. He brought a bottle of wine from Earth. They sat on the porch. The officer asked, "Do you regret any of it?" Voss looked at the stars. "No," she said. "We waited as long as we could. When waiting ended, we did what we had to." She poured 2 glasses. "To peace," she said. The officer raised his glass. "To peace." They drank in silence. Far away, the galaxy turned. Trade ships moved again. New treaties formed. Old wounds healed slowly. But every session on Nexus Prime began the same way. The Arbiter, or whoever held the role, read the words, the warning, the promise. And every time, the empty human chair reminded them. Humanity did not need a throne. They never had. They only needed the freedom to stand. And now the galaxy knew. When you force them to their knees, they do not stay down. They rise. And when they rise, everything changes. At last,